new Google Books, and Gemini Intelligence for Android. The next AI app might answer out loud, and Google circles SpaceX for orbital AI compute. If you are trying to keep up with the latest models, you already know things move at breakneck speed. Welcome to AINUCU.com, AI news you can use. We really just need to rip the Band-Aid off immediately today, because the traditional paradigm of how you and I interact with computers is experiencing a total structural collapse. Think about your workflow right now. You have a thought. You translate that thought into a physical action. You navigate this maze of folders, you open a siloed app, and then you execute a command. That is how we have been doing it since the Xerox PARC days. Historically, computation has always been a destination. You physically go to a laptop, or even with a smartphone. You break your engagement with the physical world, look down, and dive into a closed ecosystem. But we are officially crossing the threshold from translating our intent into clicks to a reality where the operating system, the foundational software running your device, just intrinsically understands your contextual intent. The AI is no longer a separate software program you run. It has essentially swallowed the operating system whole. This is the shift into true ambient intelligence. It flips the dynamic entirely. It's this layer of cognition that lives persistently in the background of your physical and digital life. It watches, it anticipates, and it activates like a ghost in the machine, only when your specific context requires it, and then it vanishes. If you look at the underlying architecture of what Google is shipping this fall with the new Google Book, it is a masterclass in this ambient takeover. They aren't just slapping a shiny chatbot onto a taskbar anymore. They have partnered with the entire hardware vanguard, Dell, HP, Lenovo, Acer, and Asus, to build machines where Chrome OS, Android, and the Gemini model are fused at the kernel level. Let's actually look under the hood at how that functions, because the Material 3 expressive UI changes are not just cosmetic. They are rendering custom widgets on the fly based on predicted behavior. But the mechanism that fundamentally rewrites human-computer interaction here is the magic pointer. Since the 1960s, the mouse cursor has been this incredibly dumb coordinate system. It literally just tells the CPU that the human's hand is hovering over a specific pixel, just a blind pointer on a grid. But the magic pointer gives the cursor deep semantic awareness. It reads the document object model, which is the structural blueprint of your entire screen, so it knows what those pixels actually represent. To give you an example of how that changes a workflow, let's say you're a civil engineer. You are reading an email from a contractor, and they've attached a 3D CAD render of a bridge support. In the old world, you download the file, open your CAD software, open your ERP system to check material costs, and then open your calendar to schedule the pour. A very disjointed multi-app process. But with the magic pointer, you literally just hover your cursor over the attached render. Because the OS is ambient, it instantly recognizes the structural file type. It cross-references the required titanium with your company's live inventory API, the software bridge that lets applications talk to each other. And it already knows your construction timeline. You don't even open a tab. You execute a micro command right there on the hover state, and the system automatically drafts the purchase order for the titanium and blocks out the pouring date on your calendar. The interface carries the prompt for you. It shifts the entire cognitive burden of translation completely away from the user. This extends to how we speak too. Look at the new Rambler dictation tool embedded in this ecosystem. We have all used voice to text, and it is always a very literal, unforgiving transcription. You stutter. It transcribes the stutter. Rambler basically attacks the pathologies of chaotic human thought, acting as a cognitive editor. Put yourself in this scenario. You're an architect walking a really noisy job site. You're highly distracted, juggling a coffee, and you hit dictate on your phone. You say, "Hey, tell the structural team to widen the load-bearing pillar on the 3rd floor. Actually, wait. Check the municipal residential code for that zoning block first. And if we need a permit, ping legal before you send anything to structural." A legacy system would just transcribe that mess word for word. But Rambler isolates your final intent. It queries the municipal code database in the background, drafts a coherent legal inquiry, and literally holds the structural email until legal approves it. It just completely ignores your mid-sentence verbal pivot and solves the problem. This frictionless reality is only possible because the era of turn-based AI is effectively dead. Previously, interacting with a large language model, the core neural network architecture behind these AI systems, was like operating a walkie-talkie. You type your prompt, hit enter, wait for the server to process, and it replies. Over and out. But the architecture we are seeing from labs like thinking machines fundamentally shatters that latency. They are operating on 200 millisecond interaction loops. That is roughly the speed of human conversational reaction time. It is full duplex communication. The AI is no longer waiting for a finalized text string from you. It is ingesting audio, video, and text in continuous parallel streams, updating its understanding while you are still talking. It maintains a rolling context window. If you're talking and it already knows the answer, based on the first half of your sentence, it can politely interrupt you. This is the core of Perceptron's new MCAI-1 model, which treats video as a fluid, temporal sequence of events, rather than scraping static screenshots every 3 seconds. And when you pull that continuous streaming out of the laptop and into the physical world, you get what Meta is doing with Muse Spark, piping real-time visual recognition directly through smart glasses. But absolute heavy lifter making this possible is OpenAI's real-time API. With GPT Real-Time 2, they have crammed GPT-5 class reasoning into a live, voice-to-voice neural net. Stack that with GPT Real-Time Translate, executing instant localized conversions across 70 input languages and 13 output languages, and GPT Real-Time Whisper, handling transcription at the edge, and you arrive at a very uncomfortable, inevitable conclusion. We are staring down the barrel of the no-app future. Leaked agent-only OS documentation from OpenAI really reads as the terminal endpoint of software. If an underlying agent can parse your messy intent, navigate all the APIs, and just execute the task, the graphical user interface becomes redundant. The operating system just dissolves. And when you factor in the hardware implications, like the open secret that legendary designers like Jony Ive are rethinking the physical chassis of computation from the ground up, we are moving toward a paradigm where a screen is no longer the primary interface. You might just have a discrete ambient node. Furthermore, these agents now possess long horizon memory. They track complex, multi-step objectives across weeks of interaction. It is a complete teardown of the consumer tech ecosystem, and you can see the physical manifestation of this with Samsung's AI Week 2026 rollout across 58 countries. The bizarre part of their massive global push was that the actual hardware took a total back seat. They are no longer selling you a refrigerator or a television. They are selling you a lifestyle topology they call AI living. It treats your appliances, your phone, and your car simply as sensory nodes, seamlessly linking your environment. Now, on one hand, this ecosystem is incredibly frictionless. But on the other hand, we have to address the philosophical tension this creates. We are essentially inserting a hyper-capable, omnipresent digital butler between ourselves and our actual lives. And that naturally spikes anxiety about the hallucination problem. In a spreadsheet, if an AI messes up a formula, you just hit undo. But if an agent fundamentally misunderstands your intent and executes a real-world action, aren't we risking a catastrophic loss of control? That is precisely the vulnerability that the 200 millisecond interaction model was built to solve. In a high latency system, a misunderstanding is fatal because the action is fully executed before you see the output. But when the agent processes your intent continuously, fraction by fraction, you regain executive control. Think of it like driving a car. If you start drifting into the wrong lane, you don't wait 10 seconds to correct it. You adjust the steering wheel instantly. If the AI starts outlining an action you don't want, you simply say out loud, stop, pivot back to the original plan, and it drops the current computational thread instantly. The speed of the model is actually the safety mechanism. The faster it thinks, the faster you can rein it in. Speaking of handing our tools over to a digital butler, this shift from software to agents is violently rewriting the economics of how businesses operate. We are graduating from the era of the AI co-pilot, which just helped you type code faster, to the era of the AI functional employee. It is birthing a new demographic called the solopreneur at scale, and it's causing a profound structural teardown of the traditional corporate org chart. Look at the fintech sector as the canary in the coal mine. Coinbase's recent 14% layoff and PayPal committing to $1.5 billion in annual savings are not cyclical layoffs driven by a recession. The market is incredibly bullish right now. These are pure efficiency pivots. Wall Street actually rewarded them for the cuts because they are deploying a new 3-in-1 architecture. In a traditional tech company, you have a product manager, a designer, and an engineer, 3 separate humans. Today, you have one highly skilled human acting as a director, using a swarm of specialized agents to execute all 3 roles simultaneously. Output per capita skyrockets, so human headcount craters. And this enterprise-grade automation is rapidly cascading down to the small and medium business layer. Anthropic's recent launch of Claude for small business is an absolute game changer. They are directly hooking into vital endpoints like HubSpot and QuickBooks. Imagine you own a mid-sized landscape architecture firm. You get a wildly formatted water-damaged PDF invoice from your soil supplier. Historically, you're manually reading that PDF, typing line items into accounting software, checking your bank balance, and initiating a wire transfer. But with Claude for small business, the agent detects the email, uses optical character recognition to parse the messy PDF, cross-references the billed amount against the vendor contract in QuickBooks, checks the local weather API to confirm delivery wasn't delayed by rain, and automatically settles the cash position via PayPal. You do 0 data entry. And with the new fast mode rollout for Claude Opus 4.7, these verifications are happening in milliseconds. Furthermore, Claude Code plugins are essentially democratizing IT infrastructure, acting as a dedicated 24/7 systems administrator for boutique agencies. But you could easily play devil's advocate here. An LLM fresh out of the box is incredibly eloquent, but fundamentally blind. It knows the history of the internet, but nothing about your specific business logic. It doesn't know your margin thresholds or supply chain vulnerabilities. Which brings us to the most lucrative race in the B2B tech space right now, solving the enterprise context blind spot. This is why the Celonis Context Model, or CCM, heavily augmented by their recent acquisition of Ikigai Labs, is so vital. A digital twin in this context is not a 3D rendering of an office building. It is a live, constantly updating data replica of your entire corporate nervous system. It ingests every software log, Slack message, HR policy, and supply chain ping, creating a living ontology. When you graft an LLM onto this context layer, the AI goes from being a generic generator to a predictive forecasting engine. It realizes that if a shipment of microcontrollers is delayed at a port in Taiwan, it will stall manufacturing line B in Germany 3 weeks from now, triggering a breach of contract penalty in New York. It predicts systemic bottlenecks before they materialize. The macroeconomic consequences of this efficiency are so profound that the Bank of Canada recently took the unprecedented step of officially classifying AI as a general-purpose technology. They placed it in the exact same historical pantheon as the steam engine and electrification. They are literally tying national interest rate adjustments to AI-driven productivity gains. This is the foundational, load-bearing pillar of the modern economy. Yet, we have to look soberly at the human collateral. What we are seeing in the labor market is far more complex than just a spike in unemployment. The World Bank and the IMF have published joint studies on a new socioeconomic pathology called superfluousness. It is the hollowing out of human utility. Superfluousness describes a scenario where people retain their titles and salaries, but the intrinsic value of their daily work has evaporated. AI agents are doing the heavy cognitive lifting, and the human employee is reduced to a biological rubber stamp, simply hitting approve on workflows they didn't create. They exist, so the company has a human to fire if the algorithm makes a mistake. You are just a meat shield for compliance. And legal systems globally are fracturing under this reality. A Chinese court recently ordered a tech firm to pay ongoing compensation to a worker whose entire department was automated. They prioritized social stability over raw technological efficiency, laying the groundwork for a mandatory digital transition fund. For a decade, Silicon Valley championed universal basic income, But UBI only solves the caloric problem. It pays the rent. It ignores the psychological crisis of meaning. If you are just bureaucratic friction in a machine's workflow, a government stipend doesn't cure the depression of obsolescence. I genuinely wonder if the conversation needs to pivot from universal basic income to universal basic agency, a guarantee that humans retain executive control and purpose. But here is the brutal physical reality connecting all of this. Whether you have an office of 10 humans or a digital swarm of 10,000 agents, they all share an insatiable appetite for compute. The digital weight of this intelligence is violently colliding with the physical limits of our planet. The compute war is a multi-trillion-dollar crisis of energy, infrastructure, and thermodynamics. Semiconductor fabricators like SK Hynix are crossing toward trillion-dollar valuations. Anthropic just finalized a $200 billion 5-year infrastructure pact with Google Cloud, purely to secure multi-gigawatt TPU capacity. Meanwhile, SoftBank's 11% stake in OpenAI is worth about $80 billion, and to defend that position, they are underwriting massive $40 billion bridge loans. If the scaling laws hit a wall of diminishing returns, the systemic risk to the global financial system is colossal. Long before the financial debt comes due, the thermodynamic debt is already here. The terrestrial energy grid simply cannot support the physics of what we are building. Just look at the newly approved AI data center in Utah. We are looking at a facility twice the physical footprint of Manhattan. Because the server racks are so dense, they are utilizing closed-loop liquid-to-chip cooling just to prevent fires. It is projected to consume 6% of the entire national power grid for a single facility. Because we are redlining the terrestrial grid, the titans of the industry are looking at the final frontier. Google and SpaceX are exploring launching AI data centers into low Earth orbit. Google's Project Suncatcher has prototype satellites scheduled for 2027. We are literally proposing shooting server racks into the vacuum of space because the Earth's crust cannot generate enough electricity. Space offers unobstructed solar radiation, and the ambient temperature of the void solves the cooling crisis. When corporations spend hundreds of billions to construct intelligence networks that consume national power grids and stretch into the stratosphere, governments inevitably start treating this technology as a strategic weapons platform. The golden era of Silicon Valley's move fast and break things ethos is completely dead and buried. The U.S. government, specifically through NIST and CAISI, has placed the top frontier AI labs under a regime of highly standardized mandatory pre-release reviews. They are red-teaming these neural nets for cyber-offensive capabilities and autonomous drone orchestration. AI is the new uranium. The recent U.S.-China summit was hijacked by export controls on advanced AI chips to China. Meanwhile, the UK has launched a £1 billion science diplomacy task force, and the EU is accelerating the AI Act. This national security lens is forcing the architecture to return to a state of extreme isolation. Google recently unveiled highly classified, air-gapped Gemini servers engineered for the intelligence community with Dell. These hardware stacks have zero connection to the outside internet, featuring a James Bond-level pull-the-plug vanish protocol that scrambles the model's weights if the physical perimeter is breached. You see this exact same paranoia trickling down to the consumer level with the OpenAI Codex sandbox for Windows. If we are moving toward computer use agents, AI that can autonomously hijack your mouse and open files, you absolutely must have local OS-level quarantine zones. They are using hypervisor technology to build a revert-to-snapshot containment field so the AI doesn't accidentally brick your laptop. But the profound irony is that human engineers are no longer capable of auditing the scale of what we've built. The only entity smart enough to secure the infrastructure is the AI itself. Anthropic is deploying their Mythos model to audit millions of lines of 1970s COBOL running Western energy grids. To do this safely, they use the Dreaming Sandbox beta, built on constitutional AI. Instead of hard-coding brittle rules, they give the model a core set of immutable principles. In the dreaming phase, the agent simulates executing a dangerous task, fails catastrophically 1,000 times, updates its behavioral weights against its constitution, and then steps into the real world and executes it flawlessly. But we have engineered systems of such staggering complexity that we mandate AI oversight, which inherently pushes the human further out of the loop. This friction between reliance on the machine and fear of its autonomy is violently disrupting how we live, heal, and create. In healthcare, the UK is seeing an explosion of the shadow health system, where 1 in 7 residents are consulting advanced AI triage bots before booking a physician. Gen Z patients actively prefer the bot because it builds a 50-point diagnostic decision tree and cross-references literature instantly. In the pharmaceutical industry, AI digital twins of patient immune systems are ending the blockbuster drug era, shifting the economics to hyper-personalized precision medicine. But while scientists hand the steering wheel to AI, Hollywood is fighting a scorched earth civil war over authenticity. RSL Media, championed by Cate Blanchett, launched the Human Consent Standard, a cryptographic framework preventing unauthorized synthetic cloning of an actor's likeness. Yet, the hypocrisy is deafening. Behind the scenes, striking screenwriters are secretly utilizing LLMs to format scripts and maintain output velocity, and the aesthetic quality of these tools is evolving. Korea's launch of their K2 model abandons photorealism to navigate the latent space of vibes. You feed it disjointed sketches, and it synthesizes a cohesive mood board, acting as an ambient art director. This philosophical divide extends deeply into education and physical craftsmanship. Google is funding a colossal initiative to train all 6 million U.S. educators on AI literacy, utilizing Notebook LM, so the next generation treats these models as foundational utilities. In industrial woodworking, automation is modernizing safety. Systems like Blastgate dynamically monitor air quality, while Altendorf's handguard utilizes computer vision to understand the physics of a hazard before it occurs. If overhead cameras identify a loose string being pulled into a blade, it drops the massive steel trunnion in 5 milliseconds. It is protective ambient intelligence. And at the macro scale, automated microfactories in the UK can autonomously mill, 3D print, and assemble structural timber panels for a home in a single 24-hour cycle. It is a fascinating psychological mirror. In digital realms like coding and data entry, we want to be entirely removed from the friction. But in physical crafts and the emotional space of Hollywood, we are desperate for the human to remain the engine of creation. We value the struggle. As the technology matures to handle administrative chores, the wild, chaotic phase of the AI gold rush is ending. We are crossing into the great consolidation. Big tech is aggressively rolling up the ecosystem. Google ruthlessly executed Project Mariner, shuttering an agentic research division to consolidate all focus under Gemini 3. Microsoft is embedding their Copilot architecture so deeply into the Office suite that avoiding autonomous agentic behavior becomes impossible. And in the enterprise sector, Anthropic's Claude model has officially overtaken ChatGPT in U.S. business paid tiers. Chief information officers want mathematical predictability and ironclad safety, not flashy consumer features. The future isn't one monolithic brain. It is a network of highly specialized ambient intelligence that fortified by orbital and terrestrial compute, woven so deeply into our lives that we eventually stop calling it AI and simply refer to it as electricity. Before we get into the final takeaways, just a reminder that you can find more insights like this at AINUCU.com. If we summarize the landscape today, we are moving from screens to ambient intelligence, where our intent is executed frictionlessly by background agents. Compute is our new global currency, demanding staggering infrastructure from local grids to orbital data centers, while national security fundamentally redefines how models are audited. Structurally, we are redefining what work means. We are aggressively outsourcing the digital administration of our lives while fiercely protecting the physical and emotional human touch. And that's your daily dose of AI know-how from AINUCU.com, AI news you can use.